So, my father just passed away, and he left us a will, meaning me and my sisters. But guys, there was one thing in the will that didn't make sense. He said he's only leaving it to his legitimate daughters. And I thought we were all legitimate. It's said that the life of the rich and powerful is sometimes too good, despite being with problems and complications at every corner. And that's what happened to me and my sisters, who got to experience one of the strangest, most horrible situations that could happen to anyone, being comparable to one of those novels of the 19th century. Well, our father passed, and he was a businessman who was glued to a telephone in his ear from the first day of existence. He was always calling whomever, and he wasn't always there for my sisters and me in our childhood. You know, missing birthdays, graduations, promotions, events, and anything else your daughter might have to celebrate being alive during her formative years. He was a terrible father, but as a tycoon, he was almost a god, to the point where it was common comments that he owned 10% of the entire city. Between so many buildings, stores, and employees, he started his empire at a very young age, and he had to manage it until his last day, which I think he even pointed out on his calendar. And that's just the way he was. It's all business, 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 feeling that everything else was a distraction. Mom says there was only a gap of a couple years when they met, when the man had a Casanova period, where he seduced her, and she, seeing his empire built by his own hands, said that she would not waste the opportunity, only the rest of the movie wasn't entirely pleasant, as, quote, they lived happily ever after. Quite the contraire. Good businessman, bad father, worse husband. And it seems, according to Mom's story, that the guy just wanted to have an excuse to, well, have a couple heirs. And that's why he asked for her hand in holy matrimony and then left her abandoned as if she were just another piece of furniture in the house. But then we, the daughters, arrived, and I feel that we were a divine punishment since he wanted a boy to be his heir. But he ended up with an army of, well, 5 daughters, each one more feminine than the previous. I'm the second one, and my life in the mansion that was my house was complicated. Absent father figure, an overdose of femininity, and conflicts with my other sister, all with different taste. There was the sports fanatic, the oldest, the social networker, the youngest, and so on, and I like to think of myself as, well, the funny one. Although it's not something so notable in my family. It was years of saying things that anyone would consider funny, but that my father would ignore no matter what. There's a horrible anecdote of him forgetting my younger sister's name, almost forgetting the fact that she even existed. He mixed our names up, forgot us, left us aside, and gave us gifts that were not even relevant. I remember that he gave my older sister, a baseball fan, a romantic novel that was a sensation that year. Well, yes, it can be applauded that he thought about the fact that the novel was popular. He did not pay attention to the taste of the said daughter. That would have been a good gift for the, penultimate daughter, who would end up eating the book as soon as our sister gave it to her. And so it went on for 30 years of existence until illness knocked on Dad's door, and in just 1 month his room was already empty. I say his room because he slept in a separate room from my mother. Something that's always seemed sad to me, but understandable because of the situation. Of course, the purpose of this text is to explain the reason for this, because there is a reason, and it was something that neither my sister nor I knew until now. A bitter truth was revealed regarding my father, and it all happened at the revolution of, well, his will. You see, my parents in recent years had some terrible arguments, to which no one paid attention because they thought it was something very common in them, and that's why the separate rooms, but it turns out that the reason for the fight was us. The same ones that Dad always ignored, and we asked why, we were always told it was nothing, and when the will was revealed, the lawyer gathered all the daughters and a family friend. My mom was not there, and rightly so, after we were told a direct text from my father that made our blood run cold. And I quote you, "I leave all the company to my only legitimate daughter." You would have seen our faces, we were in shock. Only legitimate daughter, but at first we did not understand anything. Then the family friend, the godfather of one of my sisters, explained it to us. My parents' marriage, as I told you, was just an alibi so they could have a stereotypical life and a purpose so they could have an heir. My dad did not believe in adoption and wanted to have someone of his blood. But it turns out that could only be possible on one occasion. The rest, well, let's just say Mom had some help. For years, she kept her carnal desires exposed with other men. I've had a hard time avoiding the term cheating, and out of those illicit unions came us. I mean, there's some sense in that because some of us don't share factions with my father. For example, my older sister has red hair, and my father has black hair. Although, that's the least of it because there have been cases like that before. I do have slightly darker skin than the others, but that's only indicative that I may have inherited it from my grandparents. I mean, come on. In itself, what matters is that my mom had an affair with someone, and from that relationship, almost all of my sisters came out. Only, apparently, according to my father, one of us seems to be the real one. And guys, we don't know which one. So we have to submit a test or something, only the thing is kinda complicated. 2 of my sisters are still minors, and my mother does not give authorization for DNA testing. Let's just say she's not in a very good place right now. This whole thing has shaken her up a lot, and as ugly as it sounds, we don't have the best opinion of her right now. She lied to us for many years, and when we asked her why she simply did not divorce my father, she confessed that it's because of the comfortable life that she could have had, and did have. We thought it was pathetic in the extreme, and that it would indeed be a very bad example for her daughters in the sense of seeking out a man solely for his economic status. However, she succumbed to her desires, and she met some new man with whom she had a relationship. Of course, she did this around the only time of the year when Dad would get affectionate, mostly to de-stress rather than even be genuinely with his wife. So, that in the event of an accident, there would be a valid justification that it was in fact all the results of her encounters with her husband. Typical. But that's where we came from. A perfect deception that lasted about 3 decades, and one of us just was indeed Daddy's real daughter, but we would not know which one. Our next step is to get tested since Mom won't tell us the truth. She's now in just a sea of tears, but at least the 3 of us sisters who can take the test will do it, but that has generated other discomforts, and I was the only one who was conscious of sharing the inheritance. And I say that because as soon as we found out about the situation, absolutely all of them start arguing, saying that each one was the real one, and that she must have Daddy's empire on her back. When I started to say that this was all nonsense and that none of them should try to be better than the other, they all jumped at me, saying that if I had the chance to have all the money, I would leave them out in the street, ignoring all the years that we stayed together under the same roof. Well, that hurt like hell, since, I don't know, I thought I knew my sisters better, but it turns out that they were just a front for all those years and ended up turning against each other like a cruel joke of Dad's before he passed away. What's more, we didn't know if he knew which of us was his real daughter, and to leave it to an unknown name like that, I don't know, it feels mean. It would be pitting one against the other, while he had a joint hatred for Mom. We peppered her with questions too. We asked her to tell us who our real parents were, but she just bit her tongue and kept quiet. At one breakfast, she said she was going to take a vow of silence because it was an injustice all that she was living and enduring at home. We did not give her any more importance and we're currently preparing for the exam. We've let the matter pass because we know that deep down we're afraid of the result. One or the other is excited, thinking she'll come out as the winner in this kind of twisted game. I don't know. For my part, I try to stay calm as much as possible. But it's hard when everyone's distrusting everyone in the house, and it's pathetic because I feel that regardless of the outcome, we're all still sisters, and that others would not leave the victor to her fate. After all, we're still a family, but I feel like it's only me who shares this thought. This reminds me of one of the soap operas our Nana used to watch, which always had these super trite plots of women cheating on their men, and couples coming out of poverty to start having a life of luxury. Well, I feel that that's where we're at now. And if the press gets a hold of this, not only will our reputation be tarnished, well, but many business owners won't look kindly on being part of a company that's run by daughters of a failed and unfaithful marriage. Some businessmen prefer the status quo to profit, as strange as crazy as it may seem. It's amazing how little some people care about companionship, nurturing, and sisterhood, or in our case, sorority. We had the so-and-so blood test, including our younger sisters, but they all came back the same, that we were all our father's daughters. Something Mom has corroborated to be false several times. At this point, even she doesn't know who the imposter winner is, but now everyone knows one thing for sure, it's not me. Because of the results that came back, there's a possibility that more than one was my father's legitimate daughter, but it won't be identified for another week. I say my family sucks because they all jumped on me, including Mom, and all because I didn't want to be a part of the circus. I just told them that no matter what happened, we had to stick together to endure the outcome. But they came out with the most selfish, shallow sides I've ever known anyone to have. They all started to pick on me and turn against me, saying that all of them, the one who least deserved the inheritance was me, since I did not give importance to all the economic value of the effort of her father made in the life, when the reality is very different. I know that. In part, they only do it to discredit me and lower my morale, but I'm afraid to admit they've succeeded a little. They've even decided to exclude me from their conversations, as they are busier fighting with each other than finding out the truth behind our origin. When I tried to talk it over with Mom, she treated me horribly, as if I was to blame for everything. She's been too sad these past few days, and although it's for nothing, taking it out on me makes her relationship even worse. As for me, I discovered something that I've kept secret from the rest of my sisters. I managed to track down one of the men who dated my mother, and I found out that he was a married man with children and had all that life, precisely after dating my mom for the years I was born. There's a chance that my older sister or myself is maybe this man's daughter, and in the next instance, my next sister, but I won't know any more information unless I talk to him, which, by the way, I don't plan to do. Believe it or not, I've been very tempted to do so, because at least then I'll have a backup option if I enter, the out-of-wedlock group of daughters. I'll know my origins, but I will not have the same shelter as my family. And it's dark to me that everything I've lived is about to be lost, and that my reward will be nothing, because it's not like I can get to that guy and tell him that I'm his lost daughter and he has to take responsibility for a 26-year-old. And give me 26 years of child support. There are two of my sisters that worry me, the older one and the younger one. The older one plans to turn Dad's company around 180 degrees. That is, she'll move the company's assets to other places that she considers better for business. This is really dangerous, however, because she's always had problems with Dad over this situation. This is something that dates back many years, and although Father did not have such a close relationship with either of my sisters, he at least exchanged a few sentences, and they were not entirely positive. She even thought her source was sports, wanted to invest in other businesses whose losses could be seen coming almost immediately, and she talked about supporting minor businesses, something that always bothered my family. Of course, it went against his wild nature in business, and he just liked to play it safe. He used to say, and I quote, "That's what's got him to the top, so why change the equation?" My sister would spend hours complaining to us about this, saying that he's old-fashioned and that he should pay more attention to the recommendations, instead of the genre making the recommendations because it were his loyal men friend telling him the same thing. He would have paid more attention for sure, and I avoid sticking my spoon in there. On the other hand, with my other sister, the younger one, the story changes too much since she's shown leagues that she would start a spending frenzy that would bankrupt the business. She always says things like investing in bots for her social network, buying clothing and accessories, and donating to some charity, which, while noble, would leave the company in a very bad state. As she's only 15 years old, who doesn't know how to work with money, leaving the company to her is destined to fail. I doubt very much that she's the legitimate daughter anyways, for my father would not let someone like her have such power in her hands. However, we don't know if he even knew who the real daughter was. We don't think that he did, because if he did, he would not have gone around so much, and he would have even treated that particular daughter slightly different, I assume, but he treated us with all the same indifferent equalities, and I just want this to be over so that whatever has to happen can happen. To top it all off, the funeral has been postponed because of the internal family problems this situation has generated. The funeral will be in about 3 to 4 days, but it'll be more of a symbolic act with several members of the company going and even having the presence of the mayor, who was a very close friend of Dad. It feels strange for me to say it, but in the wake of all this, it no longer feels so important that he died, or rather that it's no longer the most relevant issue of the moment. To some extent, I feel somewhat sorry for the man, as his whole life is his legacy, is currently being reduced to a nuisance that happened during his final years. I wouldn't want such a fate for myself. I prefer to live my life in peace for as long as I can, and if I can, for a long, long time. I'm willing to sell this story to any movie director to see if they can create a massive blockbuster hit. Let me take you back to the day of the funeral when it all started badly, went badly, and ended badly. Though not for everyone, of course. Things in the house have taken a horrible turn after so many fights. 2 of my sisters, the youngest and the one after me, went to stay with their friends for a few days, cutting off all contact with us, but we knew that we were going to the funeral because that was when the results were coming in. Coincidence? One of the biggest, for sure, but I still did not want anything bad to happen that day. It was just too much to ask. Preparations were made, and at one point we came to believe that Mom was not going to attend out of respect for Dad. But nothing of that sort, of course. We found her wearing her black suit like all of us, including my sisters, who returned early that morning to join us. My mom was reluctantly organizing everything, with my dad's associate being the ones who cared that everything went smoothly. Some of my sisters were pressuring the clinic to get the results ASAP, but my mother said for once, let's treat Dad with a bit of respect. On my side, I just kept quiet. Since anything I said was going to be scolded, criticized, or even made fun of. What's more, I'd literally remained silent without saying anything for a long time. And when Mom insisted that I answer her something, knowing that some misfortune would end up happening to me, I did. And 2 of my sisters started to insult me, saying that finally the one who feels morally superior to the others spoke up. I don't want to say it's like that, but they make her feel that way. After that, another argument escalated horribly, and we ended up with bad faces during the funeral. A few words were said, and we were all surprised when Mom stood up and made a somewhat hypocritical speech about Dad, saying he was the man she loved the most throughout her life and stuff like that, and I think it was, the one moment where we all called mental truce and told each other that none of what she said was real. What's more, one of my sisters gave a pretty horrible comment wondering if any of Dad's lovers would make it to the funeral. Watching it all from afar, nobody was amused by the comment. But I know many of us thought so too, and in a morbid, twisted way, after the event was over, we went to the reception, where several people showed their condolences to Father, saying the typical words of, "He was so young, he helped us, he was a pure soul." Yeah, but no one said anything about the fact that none of his 5 daughters seemed to be very moved by the affair. Not a single one shed a tear, and I know more than one noticed, and when it was all over, the guests left as we were leaving the cemetery. At that moment, one of Dad's associates approached us. The one I told you about, who was with us the day of the will, well, she asked us to accompany her to the office, so we went back, knowing what could happen. The atmosphere was so tense. Nobody said anything, and the little that was mentioned was the partner telling us how much he appreciated my father. That is the same thing that was said at the funeral. One of my sisters had no qualms about being rude and telling him that we didn't care much about what's happening, we just wanted to know the truth. Of course, it was true. But even so, my mother scolded her for being mouthy, so when we got to the place, we were more worried than excited. Now, I don't quite know how to say this part, since it all happened so dang fast. What happened is that my sisters started to argue. In a brief moment when I left the site to answer some messages, and literally out of nowhere they started picking on me, saying that I was fake, self-righteous, and when in fact I had done nothing to them. They were in a battle royale of all against all, and we had to calm down a bit to proceed. Anyone on this planet would have felt satisfaction, but my reaction was strange. I say this because when my dad's partner said that after 3 different tests the results showed that I was my father's real daughter, I could have been very excited and even got in the face of all the others who were only dedicated to annoy me. But the truth is that it was not so, since as soon as the results were said, there were several reactions. My mother lowered her head, and we thought she knew it from the beginning. We all started crying, and well, as I say, the reactions varied. My older sister was the first to respond upon hearing the results. She said, "What?" She looked at me briefly and walked away, and she didn't even bother to complain or apologize. She just turned and walked out of the office without another word. The sister following me started yelling at my father's partner, as did my youngest sister. The fourth one was just crying and also screaming pure, pitiful things. After that, I don't know how it happened, but the sister after me started to beat me up, and my younger sister joined in. Both of them against me, whining while I was trying to get them off me, and Dad's partner and my mom helped me calm them down. I accidentally scratched the sister after me right on a tattoo she loved on her arm, which made her cry in pain and leave the room. The rest of the day was very confusing stuff, and I was taken to the house where I stayed alone for the rest of the day. The only thing I knew was that Mom was going to be taking, each sister to talk to. Only I didn't know if she was the one to do that and get her daughters calmed down, being that she was the one who put us in this position in the first place. I was in my room, sitting on the bed as I thought about what would happen next. That was why I started writing this part, so that I could coordinate the ideas and thus understand the matter better. It was the first time my sisters had hit me, although the only true damaging thing was the scratch I made. Other than that, I think only time will tell how each of us will face our new destiny, and the cruel reality that we no longer have a father, even if he wasn't biologically their father. What's more, I haven't even thought about the fact that I was given a giant inheritance company. I'm too busy thinking about how awkward breakfast is going to be. Hey guys, it's been 3 months since then, and well, what can I say about it? Do I feel like a winner? Well, yes, somewhat. Seeing how my sisters are so upset after everything they did to me makes me believe that there is some divine justice. I don't know if Dad knew about whether I was his direct daughter, but after some thought, maybe I can believe that I was. I said it in the sense that although he didn't treat us as well as family, as a father or as a friend, at least he did treat us fairly, considering us all his daughters equally. The truth is that as much as I try to stop thinking about it, the whole subject comes back to me like a boomerang, and I just feel that it's one of those things that'll stay in the family for many years to come. As long as the other rival businesses or the press don't find out, we'll know we're doing just fine. Luckily, none of my sisters have shown any desire to claim part of the victory and go with these individuals. I think that the last glimmer of sisterhood they have with me. With my mother, things are different, as she went to her sisters, perhaps to spend her days there until one of us introduced her to her first grandchild. In retrospect, my older sister was very upset and took a rather determined and decisive attitude. She gave me the law of ice. She preferred not to fight, but simply ignore the matter and leave the house with her boyfriend. The last thing I remember from her is that she said she wanted to ignore any unnecessary drama, which bothers me a bit, being that she was one of the most critical of me at the time. The sister who follows me continued to stay with her friends, and together they started an art project. I don't know, it was something about getting together in one of the city squares and doing one of those artistic things that she does. Music, poetry, painting, drawing, whatever. Although she left, she still keeps in touch with others, and the other two stay in the house, although they spend alone and doing their own activities. One fourth sister comes home from college and locks herself in the room all at once without greeting anyone. If she was obsessed with books before, I feel it's much worse now. On the other hand, our youngest sister is now fully dedicated to social media. I feel she's the one who faced the raw truth better, and now says that if she didn't have the business, she would create it from scratch herself by being a social media influencer. Her account currently, I believe, has just about 10,000 followers, and counting as I write this. So even though she's not biologically my father's daughter, at least she was able to inherit his shark mind. I just hope she uses it for the good. As for me, well, it hasn't been easy. Let me tell you, keeping a business afloat is quite complicated. However, I have the help and assistance of all my dad's partners, who curiously treat me more like a daughter than my father did. They always advise me on every move I make, although I hold Dad's motto very high, and that's never go with the flow. There are times when I make bold and daring decisions that go against what they tell me, just so they know I'm not just another sheep in the herd. Fortunately, those small decisions have been quite positive for the company, and the comments have already started to come in. Only a little unpleasant, where they emphasize that I did indeed inherit and have the business gene in my blood. However, when I go back to my room at night, all I can think about is that maybe I don't care as much about the business as I do about having a close-knit family. You know, the stereotypical family where everyone could treat each other well from time to time. But hey, my dad gave us this, and this is what we got. Good for some, bad for others, but at the end of the day, I feel like that's life.